Dice are rolling, darkness falls. Inside the GM Studios halls. Tabletop games where nightmares creep. In a realm where sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss where dreams shatter. Inside the GM studio, nothing else matters. Blood and chaos, the dark arts unfold. In the realm of role-playing, where legends are told.
Welcome back, there, fellas and gals and fellas, to the side question episode of Inside the GM Studio, where me and my co-host field questions from the internet on the roll of a die. I am your co-host, David.
I'm Matt.
And, ooh, nice. I like the tenor there. It's very... Roll this die. It's a D20 for the uninitiated. And I get a 3, and Matt's going to give me a question from the internet, and we are going to riff on it until I am out of ideas.
3. Okay. This one comes from Sean Tabasco on our Ask Game Masters with the title, Evidence That Would Be Deliberately Left at a Massacre to Frame Another's Faction. I have an idea for my game where an organization is trying to stoke the flames of a war with two factions that have beef historically but haven't been engaged in war for a while. I would like there to be a massacre at one faction's village that the third-party organization did but leaves behind evidence to blame another faction, but I'm struggling a bit with what would make the most sense, short of planting a flag in the village square with a note saying, "We did this."
Yes.
What kind of evidence would it make sense for the third party to leave behind? And also, what kind of clues should be around for the party to potentially discover, showing that it was a false flag attack and not what it appears? My ideas so far are equipment left at the scene with insignias. An agent of the third party reports to a neighboring town that has what has happened, pretending to be a survivor, and maybe they do leave a flag. It just seems a little over the top.
Yeah, this is always a problem, and not just with this particular situation, but like, how do you leave clues that are not too on the nose? The key to this one in particular, I would suspect, is to try to give the factions unique identities. So that's what he was getting at with the like signet ring or something like that. But I've always found it a little bit trite that the idea that someone who's careful enough to conduct it's often like someone sneaks in somewhere and they steal something, and it's like, oh, they dropped their signet ring. It's like, dude, like, how frequently are people dropping shit? You know, like, I don't know about you, but I don't drop shit that much. And so, especially things that might be like, that would identify me, right? Dropping my press pass or something. Like, David was here, you know. It's like, so you have to think of things that make the faction being framed unique. Now, if it's a massacre, is there going to be any survivors? Are there going to be any witnesses? I mean, simply having the people doing the massacring dressed in the attire or the armor or something of the supposedly the other faction, well, that's like an eyewitnesses say, well, yeah, they were wearing the heraldry of, especially if it's medieval fantasy, it's like, yeah, it didn't used to be that like armies and stuff did things clandestinely. The whole like, you know, stealthy guerrilla warfare is a fairly new concept. People would fly their flags and wear insignia on shit and their shields, and they like wanted you to know that they were the ones doing the thing. So that's an option. Yeah, finding something like a signet ring, or even possibly, let's say, archers shot and killed people from afar, or they used some sort of siege weapons, right? Okay, so the dead are going to have arrows embedded in them. why don't you just make that faction use a particular type of steel in their arrowheads or something to that effect? Um, any other ideas on that front of things that can be left behind?
Yeah. So one that I thought of was like a not a signet ring, but maybe like a pin, like a faction pin that they would wear,
A
that
brooch.
a brooch, whatever it could be. But on the back they inscribed it with something like, to or in honor of somebody, blah blah blah. And that
Hmm.
is the clue that gives them that they go talk to this person, and just like there's no way that they would have dropped that because
Yeah.
only idiots drop shit or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. The whole like you probably need a longer runway for the PCs to investigate, right? Don't just have them go investigate the battlefield or where the site of the massacre is, and then be able to piece together like, oh, this is a false flag, or oh, it was
Mm,
supposed to be the things that point to the faction that didn't do it, the one being framed. Those should probably be contained um, at the battlefield, and it could be again just try to give them something unique. Maybe they wear a certain type of boot, and so there's boot prints on the massacre site, right?
mm,
Or they come from a certain region where there uh, there's distinct soil, for instance, and that soil is found on the site, because it comes off the boots of the people doing the killing,
mm.
or it is, I mean, even something like if they're sieging a town and killing people, maybe they have horses, and maybe the horses have to shit, and so maybe this faction feeds their horses something particular that you would notice in piles of horse shit, right? Those things are a little less conspicuous than they planted a flag or you found their obvious signet ring. But savvy those in the know, if you stack enough of those kind of subtle things up, then they would point the finger at this faction. And especially because anybody investigating is probably going to feel if you're pointing too hard at someone, then they're going to be skeptical. So the PCs need to be a little clever about kind of sussing it out, and that should probably take place of the um, outside the battlefield, like in the events that led up to it and the things that followed it, like what happened, and try to give them access to auxiliary information that exonerates the framed faction, so that they realize like, oh, like, yeah, at the battle, I keep saying battle, like when you just kill people, it's not a
Yeah, no.
battle. Right? It's just a massacre, right? It's just a genocide or whatever. So at the site it should look that way, but when you look at the before, the things that led up to and the things that after, maybe they don't follow logically, right?
Mhm.
Like something that wouldn't make much sense, right? Like they absconded in these boats, right? But the faction is notorious landlubbers or something,
Yeah.
so it made no sense that they like ran away on boats, because most of these people are afraid of the water. They don't even know how to sail or something like that. So you kind of gives you an inkling that um, you're looking at what happened after or what happened that led up to it. That kind of gets their antenna to perk up, I guess.
I like your boot print idea, because that one is a really good one that you can, it's easy to point out, like, oh, this is obviously a Cuban heel, but we're not in Miami, we're in
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, or something like that, or like I said, the dirt. Like soldiers are not. First of all, soldiers aren't likely to wear things like signet rings into battle. They would
Hmm.
they would be likely to have weapons and stuff. So making the arrowheads of a distinct steel, or it's not like people are going to typically notice when they drop things, and they're
Oh
not
yeah, like
typically like,
what was the whole thing with because you remember Game of Thrones much better than I do, but like the Valerian steel thing, was it like only
yeah.
a certain kingdom was able to get it or something, and if you had it you were known as a great swordsman because you probably killed somebody for it?
Yeah, because the process by which it was crafted has been lost to time. So it was an indicator that you um it was an indicator that you probably had to kill somebody that had the Valerian steel, or you had to have like legacy access to it since
Yeah.
before it.
So that's another good thing you do. Like if the faction had, if their forges were done in a certain way, they used a certain material, that would be a good one.
Or perhaps they're known for slaying their enemies in a particular way, right? They give them Glasgow smiles, or they, something that's a calling card that is like the way they dispatch with people. Either, and again, you don't doesn't need to be too on the nose. Maybe they use mass graves, like or they use bludgeoning weapons. It's like you need to stack a few of these things up. It shouldn't just be one thing that goes, oh, they did it because because we found this signet ring of this one guy there. It's like that's just kind of circumstantial evidence. So try to have a bunch of things that are a little more subtle that stack up, and because that's how someone framing a person would do. They would put all sorts of things that were easy to miss, but that there was enough of them that if you were deliberately investigating, you would pick them up. So yeah, think of things that, again, like a horse has no control. I mean, it presumably does, but like a horse is just gonna shit. It's more likely for a horse to shit than someone to drop a damn signet ring, or to drop really anything, because that's pretty conspicuous. But soldiers can't help tracking dirt and leaving footprints, and they can't help whatever. Sometimes perhaps in the fray of things, scraps of clothing, that might be something that, if someone fought back, there might be a scrap of clothing, there might be something like that is a remnant of a person. Maybe they have battle paint and that comes off on something, or some sort of beads they adorn their hair, their armor with, or, maybe they take trophies, like, think of Old West movies. How do they always know that Indians killed these people? Oh, they're all scalped,
Yeah.
right? And that's not a thing Westerners do. So this was Indians, and so
I got a
stuff
good
like that
one
is
for I got a good one for trying to. It's like a clue of their being framed. At least one of the factions. So the guy doing the framing shows up in the faction gear, like you said, like a certain set of armor. But there's obviously been a wound somewhere on it, like in the tunic or whatever. There's a slash with blood, but the person that's wearing it doesn't have a wound at all. Coming in talking about, we were attacked and blah blah blah. That would be a good one to show that something's fishy, as this guy shows up with an obvious like stab wound, or depending on the tech era that this game is happening, could be bullet wounds, could be a burn from a laser fire or whatever. But there's no wound actually there. That would be a good one, I think.
Yeah, or even just kind of maybe again, if there's going to be eyewitnesses, you could have like just kind of disparities in behavior, or even accounts of things that people that are more in the know would realize are not consistent. Like maybe they're wearing their clothes, but like their clothes they don't look very worn, right? Like I use this tactic a lot when you might have a character who's got like a lot of regalia on, and he's presenting himself like a seasoned warrior, but perceptive characters would know like there's not a nick on this guy's armor, and his sword looks practically new, as if it's never been used. And a battle hardened warrior uses the things that they use for battle, and frequently. So they're not going to look pristine that way. Those things are more subtle and can kind of work to give the PCs an indication that things aren't as they seem. So you have to be subtle with the things that it depends on how on the nose the things that implicate someone are, than the things that exonerate them can be more on the nose too. It just depends on how astute your PCs are, I suppose.
Some of the comments here, one by Booster Blue. This is just an old trope. I don't know why we didn't think of this one. A pin or symbol of the faction you're framing found clenched in the fist of a victim as though it had been torn off in the fighting. That could be a clue for either way. That could either be one that was left to maybe frame the other faction, or it could have been the clue that showed that, no, this was an obvious setup. That's a good one. That's kind of like a classic. Night Duty says Assassin's Creed Valhalla had a quest where this happened. The perps carried out the attack while wearing the opposing faction's gear. So you have witnesses, blueprints. Jesus Christ, man, your reading today has been horrible. It's always horrible. What am I talking about? Witnesses, boot prints / marks, insignias, longboats with specific carvings, etc. You can have them leave a real survivor who will then report back what has happened. You can also have somebody who died while perpetrating the attack. They fought back. They left the body behind wearing the other faction's clothing to help sell the story. I think those are things that we've already kind of brought up. And then Tom Streaks here just says, "Speak with dead, dude. It's a great spell."
Yeah. Again, that requires them to have access to the spell and also for the dead to be cooperative. But another one is kind of good. They use this a lot in horror movies and stuff. So if you want to implicate the perpetrator or not the person being framed, you can have something as like the other person suggested. Maybe they were fighting back and they pulled off the insignia, but probably a more clever way to do it is if the PCs investigate, they see that the person that fought back maybe is a woman and has long nails, and they go like, oh, she's got like blood and flesh under her nails. She obviously scratched. Oh, there's stubble, like whiskers. So she obviously scratched someone in the face. So then you just have the PCs encounter someone that looks like someone has scratched them in the face with their nails. They do this all the time in horror movies where it's like you realize, you see, like, oh my God, like, you get some clue and it doesn't make much sense at the time, but then you get like the corresponding gap that it left, right? So that's probably a more clever way than the clutched pin or just something like that.
I like that one. Yeah, you find the guy with the scar over his face that was left by one of the. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and so it's something that you wouldn't notice like unless you were investigating this killing. But yeah, if the people fought back in some way, like, it's probably important to consider how clandestine the operation was. Did they, like, would the faction that was gonna, let's just assume that the faction that's being framed was going to do it, would they have done it in an obvious way? And if so, why? Then it kind of gives you motivation and understanding. But yeah, think about the dead, and not only the remnants that the faction that killed them would leave behind, but what would they have done that would have left some sort of imprint on the perpetrators in some way? That's it could even just be something like a smell, for instance. Maybe they go into one of the huts of somebody that was killed, and they notice that when whoever came in and killed them, they were cooking chicken soup or something, and then they sticks to their clothes and they smell the person that smells like the hut, or they threw the chicken soup in their face and now they're burned. It's the same thing as the claw to the face or whatever. But you can have smells, you can have things that kind of just what toll would it have taken on the perpetrators, and then just have the PCs notice that that puzzle piece slots into the scene of the massacre.
The majority of these comments on here are pretty much just echoing what we've already talked about. So unless you got anything else to add on to there, David, I think that might be it.
Yeah, that's all I got.
All right, cool, man. Then we're just going to leave this one with a good night.
And good luck.